What happens when Donald Trump interrupts Barack Obama's live town hall, only to be silenced by one sentence that the entire nation can't stop replaying? The audience didn't know what hit them. It was meant to be a calm Tuesday evening town hall in Phoenix, Arizona. Barack Obama sat under the bright studio lights, his jacket unbuttoned, tie loosened just enough to show ease without losing composure. He was speaking about the strength of democracy when the moderator's earpiece suddenly crackled. The air shifted. "Mr. President," the moderator stammered, glancing at the camera, "we've just been informed that President Trump is calling in." Gasps rippled through the crowd. This wasn't planned. No one expected a sitting president to interrupt his predecessor's live event, especially on national television. The control room panicked. Producers waved frantically behind the glass. The moderator looked stunned, as if told the building was on fire. Obama didn't flinch. He leaned back in his chair, one hand on the armrest, the other resting lightly on his chin, calm, even amused. "Put him through," Obama said, his tone deliberate and composed, the same cadence people had missed since 2016. The screen above the stage flickered to life. Trump's face appeared via phone feed, his voice booming through the speakers. "Barack, I had to call in," Trump began. "I'm watching this and it's a disgrace. A total disgrace. You're talking about democracy when under your administration, jobs were disappearing everywhere. Under me, we had the best economy in history. People know it. Everyone knows it. Nobody's ever seen anything like it." Some in the audience shifted uncomfortably. Others murmured. This was more than a surprise. It was a clash of two eras, happening live and unfiltered. Obama didn't respond immediately. He turned slightly to the crowd, letting the silence linger. Then, in a relaxed voice, he said, "Well, looks like we've got company tonight." Laughter broke out, easing the tension, but only for a moment. Everyone sensed what was coming next, an unscripted showdown that could go viral in seconds. Trump, sensing momentum, pressed harder. "People remember how bad it was before me. Terrible. Manufacturing was dying. China was eating us alive. I came in and fixed it. The numbers don't lie. If it weren't for me, this country would be in ruins. And now you're sitting here pretending you did something good. You didn't, Barack. People know the truth." His words were unpolished but forceful, meant to dominate, not to persuade. And they carried weight. After all, he was still the sitting president, his name on every headline, his face on every channel. But the audience wasn't looking at the screen anymore. Their attention had shifted back to Obama. They wanted to see how he'd respond. Would he take the bait? Would he get angry? Or would he stay composed? Obama leaned forward slightly, clasped his hands, and looked directly into the camera. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush. He spoke with the calm precision of someone who had faced conflict before and understood the power of patience. "Mr. President," Obama began, pausing just long enough for the words to land. "I think the American people care less about who shouts the loudest and more about who actually tells them the truth." Applause erupted. The moderator shifted in his seat, half relieved, half anxious. The confrontation was no longer hypothetical. It was happening right in front of them. Trump's voice cut back in, louder than before. But something had already changed. Obama's response wasn't just powerful because of what he said, it was because of how he said it. The tone, the control, the poise. Viewers could feel the contrast instantly. One man loud and agitated, the other calm and steady. The moment belonged to Obama, but that was only the beginning. What followed would turn a political exchange into one of the most replayed live television moments in recent memory. Later that night, inside the East Wing, the walls seemed to hold their breath. Aides moved quietly, avoiding eye contact, anticipating the coming storm. When the door to the First Lady's private office shut, the sound was sharp enough to make a Secret Service agent glance over. Everyone knew what was about to happen. Melania sat behind a polished mahogany desk, a glass of water untouched beside her. In front of her lay a leaked DNA report, the pages slightly bent from how tightly she was gripping them. Her hands trembled. Not from fear, but from anger. For years she had perfected the art of restraint, keeping her emotions hidden from public view. But this was different. This was about Barron. "I will not let them destroy my son," she said sharply, her accent cutting through the silence. "Do you understand? I don't care what it takes." Across from her, two advisors exchanged uneasy glances. Raymond Hall, a seasoned strategist, cleared his throat. "First Lady, we can manage this. Rumors and leaks happen all the time. What matters is getting ahead of it before what?" she snapped, slamming her hand on the desk. The echo filled the room. "Before every paper in the country prints lies about my family? Before my son becomes a target?" Her voice cracked, part fury, part fear. The room went still. Even Hall, who had seen countless crises, was at a loss. This wasn't just politics anymore. It was personal. It was about legacy, family, and identity. Things no press statement could fix. Melania stood abruptly, her chair rattling against the wall. She began pacing, heels striking the marble floor in sharp rhythm. "I gave everything for this role," she muttered, mostly to herself. "I protected. I stayed silent. I smiled when I wanted to scream. And this is how they repay me?" One of her aides, a young woman named Charlotte Winslow, spoke carefully. "Ma'am, we're not sure who leaked it yet, but if we can trace it, find them," Melania cut in coldly. "I don't care how. I want to know who betrayed me." Her tone was low but absolute. The demand sent a chill through the room. Charlotte scribbled notes, her hands trembling, before quietly leaving to make calls. That left Hall, who knew better than to challenge her in this state. Still, his job was to advise. "We have options," he said cautiously. "We can discredit the report, call it fabricated, tie it to political enemies, or we can stay quiet, let it fade." Melania gave a bitter laugh. "Fade? Nothing fades in Washington. Everything becomes permanent. They'll use this to destroy him. And me." For a moment, her anger softened. She looked fragile, eyes glassy, hands gripping the back of the chair. But then she straightened, her composure returning like armor. "Prepare statements," she ordered, "but no one releases a single word until I approve it. Not one sentence leaves this office." Hall nodded, but he knew what she didn't. Secrecy never lasts in Washington. The tighter you hold it, the faster it leaks. And somewhere, someone already had copies of the report. That night, the White House staff would later recall hearing the sound of glass shattering from the private residence. A vase, perhaps, thrown in anger. No one asked. No one needed to. Everyone in Washington knew it. The First Lady had crossed a line. She was known for her composure, for rarely showing emotion in public. But this time was different. As whispers spread through the corridors of power, aides quietly shared what they'd seen. "She's furious," one said over the phone to a colleague in the Eisenhower Executive Office building. "I've never seen her like this. If anyone thinks she'll stay silent, they're wrong." Those murmurs became part of the story themselves, fueling the narrative even further. It was no longer just about the DNA report. It was about Melania's reaction, proof that the leak had hit far deeper than anyone imagined. But anger alone couldn't contain a scandal, especially when someone else in Washington was already preparing to take it public. The next morning, the atmosphere in the Capitol felt heavier. A motorcade slipped quietly down Pennsylvania Avenue, not for a ceremony, but for a discreet meeting inside a law office tucked between coffee shops downtown. Inside, there were no flags, no speeches, just lawyers, crisis managers, and political strategists gathered for one purpose: to bury the DNA leak. At the head of the table sat Raymond Hall, Melania's most trusted advisor, flanked by two attorneys from a firm known for managing political crises out of sight. On the polished conference table lay the folder containing the leaked report. No one spoke at first. They just stared at it, as if it were a live explosive. "We've got two options," one lawyer said finally. "Discredit or distract. We can call it fabricated, link it to political opponents, suggest it's a smear campaign against the First Lady. Or what?" Hall interrupted, his tone sharp. "Or," the lawyer continued, straightening his tie, "we bury it under something bigger. Another story, another controversy. Washington moves on quickly when there's something new to chase." Hall rubbed his temple. He knew the tactic. Distractions worked, but timing was everything. Move too soon and it looked staged. Wait too long, and the leak could spiral out of control. And hanging over everything was Melania herself, angry, humiliated, and demanding total erasure of the story. Back at the White House, Charlotte Winslow returned with troubling updates. She had spent hours calling contacts, tracing every possible lead. Some pointed to a source in the medical community. Others suspected a staffer with access to private records. But every trail ended the same way. Someone wanted this information out, and they had covered their tracks well. Melania paced the residence, phone pressed to her ear as Hall briefed her from downtown. "They're telling me we can bury it," he said carefully. "But it'll take time and resources." "Time we don't have," Melania snapped. "Half the city already knows. If Jasmine Crockett gets her hands on this..." She stopped, biting back the rest. Just the thought of the outspoken congresswoman wielding such leverage made her pulse quicken. Charlotte entered the room, notepad in hand. "Ma'am, there's already chatter online. Small accounts for now, but people are starting to ask questions." Melania's expression hardened. "Shut it down. How?" Charlotte asked quietly. "Call platforms. Call editors. Call whoever you must. I don't care if it takes threats or favors. No one repeats this." The room went silent. Even by Washington standards, this was extreme. Controlling a narrative was one thing. Silencing an entire city was another. Later that evening, Hall reconvened the crisis team. They ran through every possible scenario. Fake leaks to muddy the waters, discreet payments to reporters, pressure on social media companies to flag the story as misinformation. Each idea carried risk. One advisor leaned forward and spoke in a low, cautious voice. "The real danger isn't the report itself, it's the response. If people see how desperate the First Lady is to hide this, they'll assume the worst. She needs to look calm, composed, above it all. Not angry, not panicked," Hall exhaled slowly. "Easier said than done," he muttered. Meanwhile, word of Melania's fury spread faster than the leak itself. White House staffers talked. Reporters listened. The phrase "explosive outburst" began appearing in private texts among journalists, all waiting for someone brave enough to print it. In Dallas, Texas reporter Lyle Morgan sat at his desk, staring at an email from a trusted source. Attached was a scanned copy of what appeared to be the DNA report. He wasn't the only one who had it, but he was among the few willing to verify it before publishing. He made a call to a congressional staffer he trusted. "Have you heard what's happening in the East Wing?" he asked. The reply was brief. "She's panicking. If you've got something, run it." Morgan leaned back, caught between caution and ambition. If he published, the story would dominate headlines nationwide. If he hesitated, someone else would beat him to it. While Morgan debated, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett was already watching developments closely from her Dallas office. She spoke with her aides, eyes narrowing as she read through forwarded emails and early reports. "This isn't just about a family matter," she said calmly. "It's about transparency, about what they hide and why." Her team exchanged quick glances. They recognized that tone. Crockett had found her opening. But before she could act, Melania's team was preparing a counter-narrative that would test just how much control the First Lady truly had. Crockett wasn't one to tiptoe around controversy. She had built her reputation on blunt honesty and fearless confrontation. So when word of Barron's DNA leak reached her desk, she didn't just take note. She leaned in. Her staff gathered inside a modest conference room in Dallas. Laptops were open, coffee cups scattered across the table, and a whiteboard filled with names, arrows, and dates. The kind of setup that looked more like a political investigation than a routine meeting. Jasmine stood at the front, hands on her hips, her expression focused. "All right," she began, her voice steady but sharp. "Tell me what we actually know. Skip the noise, just the facts." Her aide, Marcus Bellamy, tall, analytical, and quick with research, switched to the first slide on the projector. The document first appeared in a secure email chain among medical staffers. Someone forwarded it, but we can't confirm who. After that, it spread quickly. At least 3 reporters have copies, but none have published. "Why?" Jasmine asked. "They're scared," Marcus replied. "If they go public, the First Lady's legal team will strike back hard. It's easier for them to stay quiet." Jasmine gave a tight smirk. Scared? That's not journalism. That's babysitting power. A few aides chuckled uneasily. They knew this tone. When Jasmine spoke like that, she meant business. Another staffer, Lena Ortiz, chimed in. We're hearing reports that Melania's been furious, yelling at staff, making threats. Some are calling it her worst breakdown since entering the White House. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. Volatile isn't a headline. It's a symptom. If she's reacting like that, it means this leak hits deeper than they want anyone to see. She leaned closer to the table, her voice lower. And if it's that personal, they'll do anything to suppress it. Which means it's our job to make sure it doesn't disappear. The team exchanged quick glances. They already knew where this was headed. Jasmine Crockett wasn't one to stand by and watch. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. A journalist she trusted answered, his tone cautious. Congresswoman, I heard you're looking into the DNA story. You heard right, she said, pacing as she spoke. Tell me what you know. Off the record. The journalist hesitated. I've seen the document, but I haven't published. It's too risky. Risky for who? Jasmine pressed. You? Your paper? Or the truth? Silence, then a sigh. The First Lady's team is already circling. They'll destroy anyone who touches this. Then let them try, Jasmine said evenly. I don't scare easily. She ended the call and turned back to her team. Here's the plan. We don't go after Barron. He's off limits. The story isn't about him. It's about her, the secrecy, the cover-up, and how far they'll go to protect an image while silencing everyone else. Marcus nodded. So you're preparing a public statement? Not just a statement, Jasmine replied, her tone charged. We're setting the narrative. We'll talk about what happens when power hides behind walls. The truth doesn't belong to them. It belongs to the people. That night, Jasmine drafted her remarks. Short, direct, impossible to ignore. The next morning, standing outside her Dallas office with microphones crowded around her, she delivered them calmly and clearly. Secrecy is the currency of the powerful, she began. When documents leak or people speak out, that's not chaos. That's democracy at work. And when those at the top rush to bury the truth, the real question is, what are they afraid of us knowing? Reporters leaned forward, recording every word. She never mentioned Barron or Melania by name, but her message was unmistakable. A journalist called out, Congresswoman Crockett, are you saying the First Lady is hiding something? Jasmine met his gaze. I'm saying this. If the truth makes someone uncomfortable, that's their problem, not the people's. Within hours, the clip went viral. Hashtags about secrecy and transparency surged online. Cable networks replayed her words, debating whether she'd crossed a line or simply told the truth. Meanwhile, inside the East Wing, Melania's team scrambled to control the fallout. Hull called an emergency meeting, his face pale as he showed Melania the video clip. She's careful, but she's aiming directly at us. She's turning this into a moral argument, he said. Melania's jaw tightened. Then we fight back, harder. But Jasmine wasn't just speaking. She was preparing to show evidence. The kind that would make silence impossible. That morning, the air inside the Rayburn House office building carried unusual tension. Cameras lined the corridors, reporters competed for position, and staffers whispered in anticipation. Everyone sensed that something significant was about to unfold. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett was set to speak at a subcommittee hearing, but it was clear this wouldn't be an ordinary session. Jasmine entered the chamber with her usual calm stride, papers in hand, her expression steady. There were no theatrics and only focus. Every eye followed her, knowing she wasn't just attending a hearing. She was about to reshape the conversation in Washington. Across the city, Melania's team watched from screens at the White House Communications Office. Hall leaned forward, sweat forming at his temple. If she brings this up directly, we're in trouble, he muttered. Melania sat rigid, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the screen. She had been told Jasmine wouldn't mention Barron by name. That was the red line. But they all knew she didn't have to. The hearing began with routine formalities, but the atmosphere shifted once Jasmine took the microphone. She adjusted it calmly, scanning the room before speaking. America doesn't just run on laws, she began evenly. It runs on trust. And when those in power start treating truth as optional, that trust erodes, a little more every day. Her words cut through the silence. Committee members shifted, reporters leaned forward, pens ready. Jasmine continued, her tone sharpening. Time and again, we've seen leaders demand loyalty, demand silence, and expect us to look away when truth becomes inconvenient. But democracy can't function when secrecy becomes standard practice. The American people deserve better, a congressman interrupted. Congresswoman Crockett, we're here today to discuss transparency in government contracts. Exactly, Jasmine replied, meeting his eyes. Transparency is the issue, whether it's about contracts, classified material, or private reports hidden to protect political families. The pattern is always the same. Cover it up, silence dissent, and hope no one asks questions. The room filled with murmurs. Everyone understood what she was implying. She had pointed directly toward the White House without naming names. Cameras zoomed in as Jasmine held up a document. Not the DNA report, but a timeline of communications showing how fast the First Lady's office had tried to suppress the leak. Within 48 hours of this report circulating, she said, tapping the paper. Calls were made to media outlets, editors were pressured, and platforms were urged to silence discussion. If this report was meaningless or false, why rush to bury it? Gasps rippled through the room. It was no longer about Barron. It was about power and control. A reporter called out, breaking decorum. Congresswoman, are you accusing the First Lady of using her position to suppress information? Jasmine didn't hesitate. I'm saying this. Truth doesn't need protection if it can stand on its own. If it's real, let the people see it. At the White House, Melania's fist clenched. She's exploiting this, she said coldly. Hall tried to steady her. She's framing it as transparency, not family. If we attack, we look defensive. Melania shook her head. If we stay silent, we look weak. Back in the hearing, Jasmine concluded. Her tone softened but carried weight. Families should be off limits. But when secrecy becomes a shield for power, when anger replaces accountability, we all lose. This isn't about one household. It's about every family that deserves honesty from their leaders. The room erupted in noise. Reporters fired questions. Committee members whispered intensely. By nightfall, the clip was everywhere. Jasmine quietly gathered her papers and exited, leaving behind a storm she had crafted with precision. She hadn't needed the DNA report. She had made Melania's reaction the real story. By evening, Jasmine's words dominated the airwaves. The line, "The truth doesn't need bodyguards," scrolled across CNN, MSNBC, and YouTube thumbnails. At the National Press Club, journalists debated how quickly the story had escalated. Many admitted they'd avoided the DNA angle. It felt too sensitive. But Jasmine had reframed the narrative. She hadn't exposed Barron. She'd exposed the First Lady's response, and that made it printable. Across the country, in diners and homes, people were watching. A woman in Indiana shook her head at the TV. She's right. If it's nothing, why's the First Lady so angry? A man nearby muttered, because they're always hiding something. The public mood was shifting. It wasn't about whether the leak was true. It was about perception. And in politics, perception often outweighs fact. Social media only amplified it. Hashtags like SAR truth or cover-up and a Crockett calls it out trended overnight. TikTok clips mixed Jasmine's speech with old Trump interviews. Even Instagram memes mocked the alleged meltdown inside the White House. Inside the communications office, Hall and Charlotte met late into the night. Staff looked exhausted, eyes glued to screens as Jasmine's speech replayed again. She didn't even mention Barron, Hall said, rubbing his forehead, and still turned this into a storm. She's positioned herself as the people's voice, and we look like we're hiding. Charlotte hesitated. We can't just deny it without something concrete. People are asking for proof. Why not release the truth? Melania entered quietly, the room falling silent. She pointed at the screen. She thinks she can use me, she said, her tone sharp. She thinks I'm weak. She doesn't know me. Meanwhile, in Dallas, Jasmine's office was buzzing. National outlets were calling. CNN, MSNBC, even Good Morning America wanted her live. Marcus looked up from his tablet, smiling. Congresswoman, you're trending in every state. People are calling you the voice of transparency. Approval among independents just jumped 7 points. Jasmine leaned back thoughtfully. That's good, but we keep it about principle, not gossip. The moment this becomes about Barron, we lose credibility. Lena nodded. So what's next? Another statement? A TV appearance? Not yet, Jasmine said. Let them chase us. The longer they wait for a response, the more control we hold. But when we do speak again, it must hit nationwide. Across America, people debated the issue, in schools, workplaces, and cafes. Some worried about children being dragged into politics. Others were frustrated by constant secrecy. But nearly everyone agreed Jasmine had touched a national nerve. At the White House, Hall finally spoke plainly. If we attack her, we prove her point. But if we stay silent, she owns the narrative. We need a third option. Melania's eyes narrowed. Then create one. Outside, cameras rolled, and the conversation showed no sign of fading. Jasmine had struck a chord, and the country was listening. But the First Lady wasn't preparing to back down. She was ready to respond, stronger than anyone expected. By the third day, Melania's silence had become its own headline. Networks ran tickers asking why she hadn't responded. For someone known for composure, each passing hour appeared as weakness. Inside the East Wing, Melania's team gathered. Heavy curtains blocked the light, and tension filled the room. Hall stood with notes spread across the table, while Charlotte sorted press clippings. Melania entered last, wearing a pale suit, her face unreadable. "Tell me the plan," she said. Hall cleared his throat. "We push back, but carefully. You appear first as a mother, then as First Lady. We frame Crockett as reckless, willing to drag families into politics for personal gain. If we make this about decency, we win." Charlotte added, "We've drafted a short, controlled statement. No direct mention of Crockett, but a reminder that children must remain off limits." Melania skimmed it and set it down. "Not enough," Hall hesitated. "If we go harder, it could backfire. Crockett has public sympathy. A strong attack could make us look defensive." Melania leaned forward. "I'm not hiding, I'm protecting." "There's a difference. She makes me look desperate." "I'll show her strength." The room went silent. Hall knew that tone. When Melania made a decision, there was no changing it. That afternoon, a camera crew arrived quietly at the White House. This wasn't a celebration or a media event. It was Melania's response. Sitting near a sunlit window, she looked directly into the lens. "I've always believed children should be off limits," she said evenly. "What I see now is shameful. People in power using rumors to attack my family. My son deserves privacy, not spectacle. I will always protect him." The recording was under 2 minutes, but it dominated the news cycle. Supporters called it powerful. Critics said it dodged the issue. In Dallas, Jasmine's team watched together. Marcus broke the silence. "She's doubling down on the family angle. Smart. It makes her harder to criticize." Jasmine crossed her arms. "Maybe. But sympathy doesn't erase the cover-up. That's where we stay focused." The next morning, Melania's counteroffensive expanded. Friendly outlets began carrying her message. And the political battle entered its next phase.